Good afternoon, folks. What's going on? We're back, just like Mark Zuckerberg, the lizard man himself. We've always been here. We never left. Frazer Krohn, how you doing today, sir?
Yeah, like you said, we've had a couple of weeks break, but now we're back. We're we weren't allowed in the no media was allowed at the UFC this weekend, so we thought we'll have a couple of weeks off from the podcast, but we're back this weekend. So we're back on your screens every Monday for the foreseeable.
Oh yeah, if the media is banned from the Apex, we figured what's even the point? We're not going to bother with any of that. So it turns out, this is the thing with Mark Zuckerberg, is that I feel like with the UFC and Zuck himself, there's never any we're just going to do this for fun and it's a cute little thing. There's always an ulterior motive to everything that they're doing. So what is Facebook and the UFC doing together? And it turns out like AI programmed lizard robots do actually like MMA, so that's a great conclusion, and that's what I always assumed. But what is going on with Facebook and the UFC? Is there something here?
Yeah, I'm lost for words. I mean, I personally quite literally lost for words. I don't agree with it, with closing down the whole event. I know obviously it's at the Apex, there's a limited number of fans in there anyway.
Yeah, it's like 200 or something like that. I think 200 maybe is generous, actually.
Yeah, and if you're going to close it down to fans and media, maybe just close it down to fans. Media are professionals. They're there to do a job. They're not going to be umming and ahhing and fanboying and fangirling over Mark Zuckerberg.
But you've been in press row. You know what you're saying is not true.
Well, yeah, I said, yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess, but the kind of people, I guess, that get credentialed for the Apex events, obviously it's a much smaller. You get the bigger name media outlets.
It's like a Kevin Iole would be there, not
sure,
like,
yeah. And I just don't quite understand. And then you had Mike Davis having a fan in his corner. I mean, it's kind of ironic in a way. But no, is there something between the UFC and Facebook? I wouldn't be surprised. They've now got this trainer deal with The Rock, which came out of absolutely nowhere, because The Rock is, let's be honest, he's an Under Armour athlete.
Yes.
And now suddenly, Venom is the UFC brand, not sponsor, but the UFC sort of brand, and yet now we're having Under Armour shoes. It's hopefully trending in the direction of kind of wear what you want, but the shoes, as Nate Diaz says, they suck, but it is what it is. But yeah, I personally, what are we just gonna sort of, there was rumors in the week that it might have been Donald Trump going to the event, which is why there was no fans and no media. Now that I can maybe understand. There
absolutely, yeah, I get
far
that.
more controversial views than Zuck, in my opinion. But what are we just going to sort of sell off rights to the events to the highest bidder kind of thing now? It left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Because realistically, Zuckerberg can have his robots and his team just buy out the whole of what next? Is he going to just buy out the whole of Madison Square Garden for UFC 281? Like where do we draw the line at this? It's difficult to work, but hopefully, and from my memory, Zuckerberg has never shown an interest in MMA until about a month ago when we had that clip of him released. Paddy Pimblett called him out, and that's a fight I want to see. But because that suddenly now Zuckerberg is he's in the combat sports game. But yeah, aside from that sort of 30-second to a minute clip that we saw about a month ago of him training, I've never seen him show any interest in MMA before that. So it was an odd one for me. But of course, you got the Dana White picture with Zuckerberg to spark this kind of debate, and I'm sure other MMA podcasts will discuss why was this such a significant thing, and maybe we'll look back on this in a few years when you go back to the Facebook prelims, and the prelims are aired live on Facebook, perhaps. You never know, but
yeah, that was the old deal, right? Yeah,
exactly. But I can't see that happening. They make too much money off sort of Fight Pass. I pay £60 a year for Fight Pass to watch the prelims on it, and then BT Sport subscription on top of that.
Yeah,
I can't see it going back to free to air on Facebook. The UFC is too big these days. The Facebook deal was good when they were still building their brand, still trying to become mainstream. But let's be honest, the UFC is mainstream now. It is MMA.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I think it would move backwards in a sport that's always craving legitimacy, just to be like, yeah, we were on ESPN, but now we're just see us on Facebook. I think that would be a backwards move in terms of legitimacy, viewership. Be damned, that doesn't matter. It's about looking legitimate.
yeah, for sure. And I'm not even sure if there is any significance to Zuckerberg. Maybe he was just in Vegas, but it seems strange to have almost booked it in a week ahead to say, yeah, there will be no fans and no media. You know, at the end of the day, this sport is made on fans. This sport is made on media. The media create the hype for all of your pay-per-views, all of your fight nights. Without the media, the pay-per-view, in my opinion, without the media, your pay-per-view numbers are considerably reduced because you don't have people tweeting out, you know, like ahead of UFC 280. I know you'll be attending in person, which is quality, and I'll be all over our YouTube channel, all over MMA Sucka to posting little snippets here and there.
Yeah.
And you've got people like Brett Okamoto, the big guys at BT Sport, Adam Cashel and Nick Peet sitting down to do interviews with the fighters. Without these guys, you don't get the sound bites that you can then build. Backstage when I worked at the PFL last couple of months ago, I interviewed Kayla Harrison, and she said, "Look, let's use elbows." Now I posted that interview on that post-fight interview on our YouTube channel. It's got almost 1,000 views. So that means that almost 1,000 people. Without that, 1,000 people wouldn't have heard what Kayla Harrison has to say. And at the end of the day, the media are the ones that get you the sound bites in order to hype your fight. You wouldn't get the who the fuck is that guy without the media being there asking the questions, because you do a press conference to just fans who they don't ask. Fans are interested, and you've got very legitimate fans that know the questions to ask, that are interested in the questions, but they're more how are you going to knock him out, what's next after you knock him out, and the media ask the questions that you want to find the answer to realistically. And to just completely disregard the media and disregard the fans this weekend was like I say, it left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But luckily, the card was pretty decent.
Well, before we get to the card, let's break down some of the weird stuff there. Like, so Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his shoe deal, and the fighter's not quite getting a cut of that. I agree, it's super weird. But one thing to note is that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, at least for the last 10 years, maybe he's moved on now, but he was managed by Endeavor. At what point do we look at this as like, this is just weird? But you remember when he gave the BMF title to Jorge Masvidal? Yeah, he was a WME. He was an Endeavor managed actor. Nothing here. Like I said, there's no ulterior motives to anything there's only ulterior motives to everything that the UFC does. It's always dirty. There's never just like, oh, The Rock is cool. No, they're owned by the same guy. They're owned by the same company. I think maybe The Rock has moved on now, and I don't know if they've severed ties, but in 2020, he was at least still an Endeavor managed person, and he was with them for 10 years. So there was some crossover there. But I think this is a product of doing shows in the Apex, which has always been, for COVID, it made a lot of sense. You guys have a gym there. It costs nothing for you to manage it. It's a great idea to keep shows alive when everything else is closing down. It hasn't been COVID for like a year, and they're still doing shows in the Apex because it's cheap. And I think now you're going to see sponsorship shows like this. Like, if you were doing a corporate retreat for your like Xerox or whatever, or Facebook, and you're just like, I'm going to treat 200 employees to a UFC show. I'm going to rent out the entire Apex. It's kind of a cool thing to do, honestly. I think we're going to see more and more of that. And I don't want that, because I don't really care about the Apex. I think it's a really lame event. I think it always comes off kind of flat at this point. It was really cool at first, and I really liked it at first. But after so many shows, why don't you guys do like it's so weird. Like, even when they were doing dumb shows in like dumb little towns, like a Midwest Little Rock, something like that, 5,000 people in the audience, whatever. That's a grassroots show that you guys are doing to support fans, to really grow the sport. Now you're going to do it to 200 rich guys in Vegas? Just come on. This is lame as hell. This is so boring. I think you don't want the sport to go like, and it's such an expensive sport anyway. You don't want this. Do you want it to be a high class sport, or do you want to keep the nitty gritty of like the Midwest and the poor people?
It's a difficult one for me.
Yeah.
We back? Yeah, we're back.
Oh, yeah.
It's a difficult one for me, because I genuinely think that why I genuinely think we have to ask the question: why are we not going back to not every fight is going to be a stadium fight. Let's be honest now. We're not going to MSG every week. We're going once a year in November annually, and have done since. Obviously, we had the 1 year that we missed out on that, but we have done since 2015 when Conor beat Eddie.
Yeah.
But you can tell the difference between an arena fight, which is, the UFC have gone to the UK, gone to the O2 twice now. One phenomenal show and one really, really good show. The second show, obviously, still got a lot of talking points. Paddy Pimblett, Molly McCann, Nathaniel Wood, the injury in the main event. And we're still putting on events in arenas, but why have we not gone back to doing this every single week? And I think it alludes to what we're saying. It's money. It's the monetary that they are trying to save money. This card at the weekend, with the greatest respect to the guys on it, this was a money saving card ahead of UFC 280. Next week is arguably one of the weakest fight nights I've ever seen. And
we like the people. I know you and I. We like the people on the card. I
think, the main event is fascinating. There's a couple of fights elsewhere on the card, that are really, really interesting fights. But it's a money-saving card. This weekend is a money-saving card. With the greatest respect, opening up the main card this weekend, Mike Davis versus Borshev.
Okay.
That is a prelim fight. Mike Davis coming off over about a year and a half layoff. Borshev coming off that dominating loss to Mark Zuckerberg. You had someone like Randy Costa, who's a fan favorite, opening up the card. Yes, he's on a couple of losses, but he's opening up the card.
Yes.
You've got Brendan Allen on there. You got Elliot Latifi on there, and you've got Randy Brown, Francisco Trinaldo as a co-main event.
Yeah, no, I know.
And I know Mackenzie Dern. We'll go on to talk about the main event now, but Mackenzie Dern is a good, quite big name, a really good fighter.
Yeah.
But she should be headlining, because she's headlined before, and she's, the numbers weren't too bad, but she's headlining against a girl that's 0-2 in her last two and hasn't picked up a win since November 2020. So on paper, I know it didn't play out quite like that, but on paper that shouldn't be a main event.
This was always a layup for Dern. It was set up to be a layup for Dern. I mean, Xiaonan was the one who almost submitted herself when she was trying to fight Carla Esparza. Like, she's not a talented person wrestling or grappling. This was supposed to be a layup for Dern.
This was supposed to get Mackenzie Dern a title shot. Let's be honest, and that's what it was. And next week again we'll go on to preview it. Alexa Grasso versus Vivian Araujo. For the second week in a row, we've got a girl that's ranked number 5 against a girl that's ranked number 6.
And I like Grasso Araujo. Like, I think this is the third time the fight's been booked. I like the fight. I like both people in it. But there's only 4 fights on this whole card.
4 fights so far, and we've got a few announced fights. And we'll go into that fight card a little bit later. But it's, yes, we're all saying, UFC 280, one of the most stacked cards we've ever seen. UFC 281, one of the most stacked cards we've ever seen. And yet you've got, UFC 282 in a couple of weeks' time. You've got Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley in a 3-rounder. Are you trying to tell me that Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley in a 5-round fight instead of Alexa Grasso versus Araujo, which would make a compelling co-main event across 3 rounds? Are you trying to tell me that O'Malley and Yan wouldn't do more numbers than Grasso and Araujo? If that's what you're concerned about.
That's the thing. We have the 2 tiers of UFC shows are now so far apart where they just need to fill a contract for ESPN. It doesn't matter how good the numbers are on ESPN. They just need to fulfill the contract. The only numbers that matters are pay-per-view numbers. So you see now stacked pay-per-view shows, and every fight night, you and I, this has actually been the theme of 2022. Every time that you and I are on, I'm just like, this fight night kind of sucks. This fight night kind of sucks. This fight night kind of sucks. The pay-per-views look great. But I think this like massive 2-tier thing, I don't love it, because the way that the UFC spread in my life was really good fight night cards on like Spike TV as a young man. So I think having good quality cards is more important on free TV than on pay-per-view. If you were putting everything behind a paywall, this is again becoming a rich person's sport. It's not spreading the way it's supposed to. Yeah, I'm not wrong here, right? Like these Apex shows are just a contract for ESPN.
No, completely, and I completely agree with you. And
Yeah.
but surely you'd want the fans to watch a really, with the greatest respect to Mackenzie Dern and Xiaonan, how many fans did they turn over from a casual that will just watch it to paying $70 for the UFC 280?
No, I mean, like none, like zero. I
The
bet
same
it's
with
zero.
Grasso and Arujo. How
Maybe.
many are they? How many are they transition? Because I suppose with that fight night, it's slightly different because they're going to be pumping out the UFC 280 content this time next week, this time next week, this time next week, and you can sort of build off of that. However, I'm looking down the UFC 280 card and I can see 4 fights on there that are more compelling main events than all of than Grasso versus Arujo. And again, it's no disrespect to Alexa Grasso and Vivian Arujo, but
yes,
it's just principle. Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady. Bilal Muhammad's already headlined before against Leon Edwards. Obviously, that didn't quite go to plan. And Sean Brady is undefeated.
Yeah.
Caitlin Chikagian versus Manon Fiorot.
That's
previously booked. Caitlin Chikagian's competed for a title before. And, that is essentially finding the next contender for Shevchenko. Beneil Dariush and Mateus Gamrot. Beneil Dariush obviously supposed to be fighting Islam Makhachev. I think that's probably on the card in case one of the guys fall out. And the same with Petr Yan and Sean O'Malley. If in case one of the guys fall out of the co-main event, they'll probably fill in for the co-main event. But we can't be doing that.
Even Nikita Krylov versus Volkan Ozdemir.
Volkan Ozdemir, exactly, yeah.
It's on the card. That could be a main event. That's such a good fight.
Exactly, and it's not. It's not that like this weekend. We had Mackenzie Dern versus Yang Xiaonan. That's not a bad fight. It's a really good fight, and I'm glad that it was a main event because I'm glad that we saw both girls go 5 rounds. I think it's the first time that Yang Xiaonan has gone 5 rounds in the UFC or even been scheduled for 5 rounds in the UFC. Yeah, so it's the first time in her entire career that she's gone 5 rounds, and so it's the first time that it's her first main event, and I thought she was really good in the fight itself.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And Mackenzie Dern, I think that was her third main event or second main event. Sorry, she obviously lost to Marina Rodriguez back in October, but of last year. But it does make you sort of question why these guys, aren't how many people are going to transition from casual fan tuning in for a fight night to I'll pay $70 every other month or every month. It's every month, and we had 279 last month. We've got 280 in a couple of weeks, and then it's not much of a gap between 281 then. So $140 odd. I'm assuming the pay-per-views are going to be about $70 each. They usually are.
I've never paid. I don't know. I assume so too.
I'm lucky enough to have BT Sport, so it kind of comes as free, but or included in said subscription. But it's you're asking a lot of people and not really giving them much back on these free ones.
Yep.
To the quote unquote casual fan, how many people you've probably heard of Mackenzie Dern because you've probably seen her beat Gabby Garcia. You've probably seen her pull off these crazy submissions. But who's heard of no disrespect, but how many people have heard of Yang Xiaonan?
I think I'm her only fan. I like Yang Xiaonan.
I was the only one on the MMA Sucka staff picks to pick her to beat Mackenzie Dern this weekend. And we'll go into that fight now because I thought, yes, it was 25 minutes. Yes, it was quite grappling heavy. But for us to enjoy those grappling exchanges and understand a little bit more of, again, the casual fan, don't put a grappler in the main event because the casual fan will lose interest in grappling. They want to see 2 people. They want to see Cyril Gane versus Tai Tuivasa every single Saturday night. 2 big guys slogging it out. Mackenzie Dern is a phenomenal grappler. But the reason I picked her to lose is because she can't wrestle. I've said this time and again on this podcast. She cannot wrestle. And her wrestling down in this one, she completed 2 of 11 takedowns. And yes, some of her transitions to get the fight to the ground were phenomenal. I think it was it the second or third round when she sort of scooted on her butt to get sort of corral Yan up against the cage and then managed to sort of almost pull her into a guard. But across her UFC career, she's got 11% takedown accuracy.
Yeah. Sorry.
for someone that is so phenomenal on the ground, you've got to question, why are you not? You know, Jason Perillo has really, really helped Mackenzie Dern improve her stand-up game. Her boxing is decent. She needs to not back out with her chin all the way up in the air, because someone, you know, a heavier hitter, you know, if Jessica Andrade, I can't remember what weight she's fighting at now, because she fights, I think she fought light heavyweight before Jessica Andrade. But if someone like Jessica Andrade lands on Mackenzie Dern with that chin up in the air, it's
That's
good
it.
night done.
I
We
mean,
saw
Yan Xiaonan almost knocked her out.
yeah, sure. You know, at the end of the day, she is backing out with her chin very high up in the air. Yan landed on her big time, a lot.
Yeah.
But I think this fight really showed that Mackenzie Dern does deserve her place at the top of the division. And I'm glad to have seen her sort of get her career back on, not back on track, but on track, because she came over from jiu-jitsu, this phenom, but she's missed weight 3 times in her career. But on Friday, she looked absolutely shredded on the scales. She's, for the past however many fights, it hasn't been a struggle for Dern to make the weight.
Yeah, which is great, which is really nice to
Which
see.
is exactly, and you know, she's getting fight of the night, she's getting performance of the nights, and at one point, I did think she was going to get her second omoplata rear naked choke. You know, she got one against Montella De La Rosa in LFA, or Legacy FC, in 2016. I'm sure everyone's seen
Of course.
the video, or at least just the photo. It's De La Rosa's tangled up like a pretzel. It's awful. But I thought she was going to get the second one of them. But Yang Xiaonan did really well on the floor, which is ironic for someone that got absolutely battered on the floor by Carlos Plaza.
I think this fight was like as close as you can get to like a UFC 1, UFC 2 ultimate styles of like this person barely has takedowns, almost has no stand up at all, but has submissions, versus a person with no ground game but some good stand up. But I think like Yan Xiaonan switching to Team Alpha Male, she's improving more in her ground game than Dern is improving in her stand up game.
Yeah.
I would argue, like she's working off of her back. She's defending submissions. She was defending takedowns, and then on the feet, she was landing well. I don't think Dern is improving too much with Perillo. I feel like Perillo. This is not one of the people. Perillo is so good, and you see how he works with people. He still needs to get Dern of like, don't cross your shoulders, don't cross your feet, keep your feet under you. You know what I mean? We're still on like, if she was coaching a wine mom's boxing class, we'd be like, oh, this is a bit of a mess here. Dern, what are you doing?
And you know, if you look at the people that Perillo has coached, you've got Marlon Vera, not a wrestler, doesn't really look to take the fight to the floor ever. Michael Bisping, not a wrestler, never looks to with a takedown. Luke Rockhold, I think, last fight, didn't really look to wrestle all that much, but Rockhold had that wrestling base from AKA. Are we giving Perillo too many props for Mackenzie Dern because she has such a low level of striking, and now she has improved somewhat? We can't deny that her stand-up has improved, but it was amateurish when she first started. But she got by on the fact that she could just take everyone to the floor and absolutely dominate them on the floor.
Yeah, maybe the thing with Jason Perillo is he can take a journeyman striker and turn you into a masterclass striker, but you need a little bit of base there, because like the stuff he did with Bisping of like, I see your entire game. Here's how we're really just going to like perfect the jab, and everything's going to work off the jab. You're already a good striker, but here's how we really perfect it. And that's what we've seen with that. What he's done with other strikers is it's like, you're already a good striker. We're just going to sharpen everything. But with Dern, I feel like he's like, here's how to put your feet down below you. why are your feet everywhere when you're striking?
Exactly. And I almost feel like if I'm Mackenzie Dern, I up sticks and go to AKA, because
she needs takedown.
You have Khabib, who, let's be honest, his striking was, despite the knockdown on Conor, let's put that to the bed for a second, his striking was poor in comparison to the rest of the
guy who knocked down Conor McGregor. Are you kidding me right now?
No, but you know, let's be honest, his striking was his, without a doubt, poorest aspect of his game.
Yes. Oh yeah.
But it didn't matter because he got every fight to the floor and killed everybody on the floor. Now, Mackenzie Dern, once she gets everyone to the floor, she pretty much kills everyone on the floor. It's getting people to the floor.
She does, yeah.
You know, Khabib had that kind of style where he waded forward and then managed to close the distance. Sort of that crash forward style, close the distance, get the fight to the floor. Mackenzie Dern needs that in her game because she's crashing forward, but she's not cutting off the cage and she's being tagged and then Yan Xiaonan is circling out. And like I say, I'm not going to brag. I'm not going to tell you I told you so, but I am the only member of the staff that picked Yang Xiaonan to win, because I just think once you get so badly beaten, like she did against Carla Esparza in the takedown game, her takedown, she's going to have worked that for the Marina Rodriguez fight, and especially for this Mackenzie Dern fight. And like you say, working with Team Alpha Male, Uriah Faber in her corner, she's only going to improve on that. And she's elite on the feet. We saw, the side kicks early doors in the fight. The side kicks, the strong hooks on Mackenzie Dern.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, I think I do think that Mackenzie Dern could have a title shot, but I just think that she's got there's such a big gap in between her striking and wrestling and her jiu-jitsu that maybe they'll never quite meet to where, let's be honest, I think for her next camp, I don't know who she'll fight next, but I don't think she needs to train jiu-jitsu. I'm looking down the division now. There's in my opinion, there is nobody that she cannot compete with on the floor.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. On the floor, no problem.
And
there.
You look at the women's strawweight division. You've got Carla Esparza, the champion. She beats Carla Esparza on the floor. Nami Yunus would be a competitive fight on the floor, but I don't think she gets the Nami Yunus fight. Zhang Weili is still, again, learning the wrestling game, as it were. We saw her in her past two fights sort of ease towards that more wrestling-heavy game. But let's be honest, Mackenzie Dern's going to take a drop back in competition now, and it's difficult because she's ranked number 5. She just fought number 6, lost to her, so they'll switch places, I imagine. She beat Tisha Torres. Amanda Lemos is booked. She's been beaten by Amanda Ribas, and I'm pretty sure she beat Jandiroba. She beat Jandiroba back in December. I think Michelle Waterson's in there, but that's probably the fight that happens next if Michelle Waterson continues to fight. But I have no interest in that whatsoever.
I would thought the same thing when I saw her on the. I don't know how she's still ranked. In all honesty, I like. We all love you. We all love her, Michelle Waterson. She doesn't deserve to be ranked in the top 15, but that is the fight that they're going to make next. No doubt about it.
Let's be honest. She hasn't picked up a win since 2020. She hasn't got back-to-back wins since 2018.
No.
And she was submitted in her last fight, so maybe they sort of look to build Dern back up by getting a win over Michelle Waterson, who, let's be honest, like you say, we all love her, we all respect her, and she has a name in the division. Not quite sure how she's still a name in the division, but she is a name in the division. I think it's a difficult one for sure, but I do think that Michelle Waterson is the next fight to make. And for Yan Xiaonan, I think the UFC are putting all their hopes and prayers on Zhang Weili winning in New York and Amanda Lemos upsetting Marina Rodriguez, because if Zhang Weili wins in New York and beats Carla Esparza, which I'm going to pick her to do, I'm going to say right now I'm going to pick her to do.
Okay.
It could potentially set up an all-Chinese title fight in China between Yang Xiaonan and Zhang Weili. However, that does seem harsh on Marina Rodriguez, as she holds a win over Yang Xiaonan last time out. But she's booked against Amanda Lemos, so if Amanda Lemos beats Marina Rodriguez, that kind of scratches her out of the title picture, promoting that all-Chinese. The UFC are hoping that everything kind of falls into place nicely.
Yeah.
Whether that'll happen, I'm probably going to pick Marina Rodriguez to beat Amanda Lemos. I'm really high on Marina Rodriguez, and I think she's quality, so she'll probably get the next title shot. But as far as numbers, it's not, the UFC isn't a fair business as far as numbers are concerned. Yang Xiaonan gets that next title shot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the right. I think the UFC would absolutely do that. And I think that's actually not. It's not even of all the weird UFC like business over sport. That's not the worst one. That one's okay. I don't mind that at all. That's actually fine. And then the UFC tends not to do like at the top of the divisions. There's not like tournaments eliminating top contenders. The UFC almost always has 2 top contenders in every division. It's just kind of the way that they function. Because if Marina Rodriguez loses to Yan Xiaonan, or Yan Xiaonan now loses, they just have one clear contender, all their eggs in one basket. They tend to have 2 contenders going at any one point. Yeah, I think that's the right way to move forward. Anything else on this card? Randy Brown picked up a win. He's always promising. He's always a prospect. He's just forever promising.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's for whatever reason, I think Randy Brown's got a lot of big wins in his career, but I can only remember him having that crazy knockout loss to Nico Price when Nico hammer fisted him from the bottom whilst trapping his head in his ankle. It was crazy. But yeah, aside from that, Sadiq Youssef, obviously he was. I think he was scheduled to fight Giga Chikadze. Was it Giga Chikadze he was scheduled to meet? Yeah, in September, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they brought in someone from outside of the UFC. Now, are you telling me that there was nobody ranked in the top 15 of featherweight that could make weight on 2 weeks' notice?
Yep.
And there was nobody in the UFC at featherweight who doesn't have a fight.
He had to fight Don. All the fans were like, let's get Don Shanis in there. We have to see this fight. We have to know.
And look how that played out.
I know.
I mean, it's the Mayweather Pacquiao of our time, but unfortunately, it didn't quite work out for Don Shanis, who I imagine will get another shot.
Man, I promise, like the people listening, we do actually like this sport. But let's move on. So this past weekend, we also had. Let's do the preview. Let's cover off with Bellator, and then we'll cover what's going on this weekend because there's some fun stuff there. Bellator also happened. Patricio Pitbull defeated Adam Borics via unanimous decision. What did you see on the big Bellator event? Tell me what you saw, how you feel, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think Patricio to show that he's levels above the rest of the division, other than AJ McKee, but AJ McKee's now moved up in weight. I think this fight was also, this card was also kind of, you're hoping that Aaron Pico won, so he'd be pushed into that title picture. But
oh man,
I don't know what it is with Aaron Pico. He's been poorly matched in his debut in New York. He was then poorly matched twice against Henry Corrales and Adam Borics, who are worlds ahead of him as far as when he fought. I didn't realize when Aaron Pico fought Henry Corrales, Henry was 16-3, having mostly fought, having fought in Bellator a lot, including names Patricio Pitbull, Emmanuel Sanchez, and Daniel Strauss. Yes, he lost all those fights, but he's been in the octagon with these guys.
Yes. I honestly, okay, so Aaron Pico, I know Bellator knows how to build a prospect. You know what I mean? They find these guys who are just like part-timers for their prospects to beat up and build their name.
MVP, AJ McKee.
Yeah. They have great they look good against opponents because Bellator knows what they're doing. I think it's actually Aaron Pico's management and training staff who's requesting these big fights, because do you remember how hyped Pico was by his training staff and management of this kid is already better than anyone in the UFC. He is making his debut. He's already better than everyone. I swear it's not Bellator. I think it's this team around him is giving him bad matchups. But he got a couple wins, and then this was a weird loss.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you match him with Adam Borics, who knocked him out in the second round.
Yeah.
Who then fought for a title this weekend on the same card as him. Now, yes, he got pretty badly dominated by Patricio, but they're worlds apart. And I think this, unfortunately for Aaron Pico, I think this was the right step up, Jeremy Kennedy. To it's so difficult because, like I say, I do think that this was the right step up in competition from what he's been fighting at before to who he's fought now. Jeremy Kennedy, probably the right caliber of opponent, and yet he just gets a shoulder injury. If I'm Aaron Pico, I'm so frustrated. But he's been knocked out twice in his career. He got choked out on his debut. He's now suffering from a shoulder injury. It's taking nothing away from his talent, but he's 10-4 now.
Yeah.
If you're supposed to be the hottest ever prospect, let's be honest, that's the way they were hyping him up ahead of that. Debut in New York City, the best ever prospect. He's an Olympic level wrestler. He missed out on the trials. He's an outstanding wrestler. He's training boxing with Freddie Roach and all this.
Yeah.
And in his first 7 fights, he picks up 3 losses. And his first 14 fights, he's won 10, lost 4. In Bellator as well, who are notorious for, like you say, building. MVP didn't have a competitive fight, I think, until he fought Paul Daly.
Yeah.
AJ McKee pretty much breezed his way through Bellator.
Yeah.
These guys are being given these potential prospects, James Gallagher as well,
Yes.
are potentially being given and sometimes it does blow up in their face, like we saw with Valerie Loreda, who lost to Hannah Guy because she just wasn't ready. Clarissa Shields in PFL, they know how to build, but then that didn't quite go to their plan either.
Yep.
It's difficult because, like you say, Bellator are good at building prospects. They will give you 10 bin men for every decent fighter you fight, but Aaron Pico needs to really knuckle down now, I think, and this weekend aside, because a shoulder injury is a shoulder injury. I'll be honest, I haven't watched the fights. I haven't been able to catch up on them, but it's just difficult for Aaron Pico now. He's fighting at featherweight when he's nowhere near title level, and there's so many people above him in the division that I think could probably beat him with relative ease.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
He needs to,
I'm
really
worried about like he's only 26, which is young, but in combat sports years, he's wrestled the highest levels for like the last 10 years and now doing MMA for 5 years or so. And now he's sustaining an injury of like, are we seeing the end of Aaron Pico?
Rough on the scales as well. Every Thursday or Friday, whenever Bellator choose to weigh in, he looks drawn out on the scales. And then the argument is we'll move back up to lightweight because his debut was at lightweight. But then you've got AJ McKee in the co-main event at lightweight who toys with Aaron Pico.
No, yeah, absolutely.
So it's I think Spike Carlisle gives Aaron Pico a tough fight. And that was a fun fight, crazy scorecard, 30-27, 30-26, 29-26. But for Aaron Pico, I think unfortunately for Aaron Pico, I think he's in a division that is probably Bellator's strongest division, in the featherweight division.
Yeah.
And then he can move up to lightweight, which is also a very strong division. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place at the moment in his career. But like I say, it's difficult for him because an injury can happen to anyone, that kind of an injury. But like you say, in combat sports years, he's 26 years old. In combat sports years, he's 36. He's been knocked out twice, choked unconscious on his debut, and now he's suffering a shoulder injury, which for someone that's 26 and supposedly in their prime shouldn't really be happening. But it is what it is.
They put so much stock into to Pico. It should have been AJ McKee the whole time. It took them a long time to come around to like, oh, AJ McKee is super good. Holy shit! Like he just kept winning and winning and winning, and they couldn't stop AJ McKee. And I think just last year they put the hard sell on AJ McKee, and it's paid off. He's the prospect. He's 27. He's not really a prospect. He's a super great fighter. He's a very good fighter.
Sure. And his first fight up at lightweight now is you can build. He's 1-on-1 with Patricio.
Yeah,
and now he can maybe go and fight Patricky for that lightweight belt, which is certainly exciting.
Yeah, there's some good stuff going on. So let's get to this weekend's what's going on. We got some Eubank Jr. I'm going to cover off the Glory Collision quick because I got to cover it off. I'm flying down to cover it. Badr Hari versus Alistair Overeem is looking to cover off end their trilogy fight. There's also going to be, I think, 4 or 5 title fights on the Glory Collision card. We'll definitely be covering it all week. We've got some interviews coming up and all that good stuff. But Badr Hari versus Alistair Overeem 3 in 2022. It's only been 13 years since their last fight.
I was going to say, I know it was a long time ago, but I couldn't remember.
It's been exactly a minute.
But yeah, just a 13-year break for each guy. It's not bad.
I don't want to paint it too much, but Badr has been struggling to get a win for the last like 2-3 years. It's some just weird stuff. He's getting knocked out. He's getting dropped in most of his fights. Overeem. So Glory has brought in some good drug testing, and then Overeem went to Thailand to do training. I won't elaborate on what that might mean, but I just.
Do you think we'll get the return of Uberine this weekend, or is it weekend?
Yeah, it's this week. It's this Saturday
It's
night or
Saturday night. Yeah, I was going to say because they sometimes do midweek cards, don't they?
No, I genuinely think Uberim's gonna be in there. He's back. He's flying in from Thailand to his home in
Yeah,
the Netherlands,
why
and then
not?
there's a top contender, and they're like, no, the top contender needs to fight somebody else to earn it. I think they're trying to get like Overeem to fight Rico next year in 2023. I think that's the hype fight they want because they know Overeem doesn't have much time left. If they don't get him in a title fight, if he doesn't beat Botter and get a title fight, he's not going to be able to work his way up. But yeah, I don't know. 13 years on, these two guys are absolute legends. What's your thoughts on that one?
I'll be interested to see how Overeem fights because if you remember towards the latter end of his UFC career, he was much more movement based. That lead hand was sort of out there looking to parry a lot more, and he looked a lot more to pop shot rather than to sit down on any punches, especially against Walt
Like
Harris.
Rosenstruck and Walt, yeah, Walt.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, you can't when you're that. Let's be honest, he's going to be big. He's going to be a big lad in there. When you've got Badr Hari, who is a big guy as well,
Yeah,
and you've got a much smaller area to operate in, it's going to be interesting. I'm really interested to see how. For me, do I want to see Overeem versus Rico next year?
I might as well. It's going to be so much hype. There's so much hype for it. I might as well
I've
watch
seen
it.
Overeem knocked out too often, and I don't want to see him knocked out against Rico. But you know, it is what it is. But the outcome of this fight for me, it is what it is. But I am intrigued to see how Overeem fights.
Yeah,
And like you say,
in kickboxing, he was a clinch heavy fighter, and Glory doesn't use K1 rules; they use their own rules. So I'm not sure. I think he can do a one-handed clinch and do one strike and then release, and that might be enough to win.
especially you know, I'm just looking down Badr Hari's record here. Obviously, he had that horrible arm injury against Rico years and years ago.
Yeah, that sucked.
And then you've got a no contest, a leg injury against Rico.
Yeah,
And then
a knockout loss.
the knockout loss, and then the second knockout loss. So
in fights that he was winning, also he was ahead in those fights and then got knocked out. Like this
exactly.
is,
and you got to ask, always got to ask about Hari, how switched on is he to fighting, or is he more switched on to having a fight with random people on the street in the audience in the crowd in a was it a bank or something that he got arrested for when he's kind of walked in, or a shop or something that he just walked in and just sort of just dropped the guy for seemingly no reason, just walked in, punched him, and kind of just walked out. Okay.
There was the bank one, there was the nightclub one, there was like
yeah, I was gonna say, when I say the one, maybe you should see. This is what I'm saying. You shouldn't be able to name off multiple. That shouldn't be a thing, but it is what it is, I guess.
But let's move forward. Let's look at the Eubank card because that's a really fun one. Eubank Jr. versus Benn. Tell me a little bit more. Bring me up to date. I'm not an expert on the boxing stuff, so make me an expert here. Tell me everything going on this one.
So you know, obviously we've got the rivalry between the Benn and Eubank name. You know, Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Senior fought twice right back in the day. Let me just have a quick look at when it was. So they fought, first time they fought 1990.
What?
Then they rematched 3 years later, split draw. So Chris Eubank, Tico, Nigel Benn, big swollen eye, horrible stoppage for if you're a Nigel Benn fan. But it was pretty bitter. The rivalry was pretty bitter, and you know this was around the time that you had Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn, Steve Collins, and then towards the sort of latter stages of the early stages, like a Joe Calzaghe coming through at the time, but you know they never fought. But you know, you then look at, should Chris Eubank have won that second fight? Should Nigel Benn have won that? It's a split draw. So if we're being technical, the Eubank name is still sort of 1-0 up against the Benn name. Now, the thing is, these two guys are not the same weight. It's being contested at 157. Eubank Jr. usually competes at 168, I believe.
Okay.
Well, 160 or 160. I think he's gone up as high as super middle. Conor Benn usually competes down. I think it's welterweight. The boxing confuses me with the weights, but I think it's welterweight. So Conor Benn competes at 147. Chris Eubank competes at 160 to 168. Let's say.
Right.
Conor Benn's undefeated, 21-0, and has hit a really good run of form. He struggled against Cedric Pernard back in 2017, and then knocked him out in there, and then and then beat him in their rematch.
Mm-hmm.
After that, Samuel Vargas, first round TKO, Chris Algieri, fourth round finish, Chris Van Heerden, second round finish.
Okay.
But Eubank Jr. has only lost twice to Billy Joe Saunders and George Groves. Both of those by decision. Both of those phenomenal fighters.
Yeah.
It's going to be a war, and I am very excited. I think Chris Eubank Jr. has just got too much as far as high-level experience is concerned. I think Eubank Jr. is really, really, and he said, "Look, if you beat me, I'll retire. I can't lose to you," which is interesting because it's not that clear a fight, in my opinion. That kind of, it's not a given that Eubank Jr. wins. He's the favorite going into it, but it's not a given that he wins. Conor Benn is a ferocious hitter, and the only thing that I think that might let Conor Benn down is his gas tank, because he will go in there and look to. He said, "Look, if there's a opening, I'll take it." I think he'll go in there looking for the knockout from the first minute, and with someone like Chris Eubank Jr., who said that he only needs to be at 60% to beat Conor Benn. Obviously, these are just mind games, and he's just trying to get in his head. But I think with someone who's as elusive as Chris Eubank Jr., it's going to be tough to just land on him and get it done and get it out of the way early. So it might go late, and I think Eubank Jr. maybe takes over late and gets a decision win. But I'm fascinated by this. I can't wait to listen to all the breakdowns this week, and I'll be watching on Saturday night.
It's insane that this is a second generation rivalry. That stuff and at the level where it matters as well. They're not just like some amateur and they're just like putting it together because they need to. This is at the highest level, second generation. That's insane. That never happens. This is like the impossibility of this and it being relevant to the current scene. This is so cool. It's actually awesome.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I completely agree. And these two guys, they're not just two journeymen who happen to be, Eubank and Ben's sons. These two fought on 2 pay-per-views back in the day. Why don't you two just have a quick,
whatever.
The fight itself doesn't make sense. It doesn't do much for either man aside from their purses. Neither man is going to move up in their respective divisions with a win over each other. But like you say, these two guys are at the top of their pinnacle of the sport within reason. They're probably the rung below, or maybe one below that, of top world title level. Chris Eubank Jr. has fought for a world title before. It doesn't make an awful lot of sense, but then again, it does, because why not? They're pitching it as born rivals. I'm not even convinced that these two guys were born when the first fight happened, 1980. Chris Eubank was born in 89, and Conor Benn's younger than him, so he's born in Conor Benn's the same age as me, born in 96. So these guys weren't even born when their dads first fought, and yet they're fighting now. It's really fun, but it's disappointing in a way. Nigel Benn's obviously slightly more involved with Conor, but Chris Eubank Sr. doesn't really want to get involved with this fight at all, which is a shame, but it is what it is.
Yeah, you want it to be like family versus family. You want to feel like legacy, and I think they built it up in that way still, even if it's, we're selling a boxing card, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it's going to be exciting. I like the hype up for it already. That talk around it is good. That's some prime stuff.
I'm really excited for it, and I'll be tuning in on Saturday night to watch it without a doubt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's in the right time zone, so we're all good on that. And then something that we'll definitely not be staying up for, Viviane Araújo versus Alexa Grasso, arguably for maybe one of the top contender positions in that weight class. Maybe Manon Ferro is more relevant to the weight class. I don't know. But this is the thing. It's a main event, and we're like, I don't know what this is for.
Yeah.
It's an okay fight. There's 4
I think this is for a shot at a number 1 contender fight. So this is almost like a number number 3 contender fight. You know, it's an interesting one. There are some good fights down the card. Obviously, Grasso Araujo, I think, is a really good fight. Not a main event fight.
It is a good fight. It is not a main event fight.
Rafael Sansao returns.
Man, he is past his prime.
He is searching for a win since 2018, but it is what it is. Askar Askarov versus Brandon Royval, really good fight.
Yep.
Nick Maximov and Jacob Malkoun, that's an exciting one. And Neil Magny versus Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel Rodriguez only fought, 2-3 weeks ago, and he's already back fighting. You know, he fought on the 10th of September, and now he's fighting on the 15th of October. Why not, you know?
Yeah.
Oh. Right, okay.
You were looking at the wrong one.
No, we're breaking down this card. It's not this weekend, is it? No, it's not this weekend. We have a weekend off. This is the 15th of October. This card.
Oh, well, stay tuned for our expert coverage.
We are so far off it. I got completely confused. But anyway, we'll do a brief breakdown, and then maybe we'll do a bit of a mailbag next week and go into a little bit more detail on this. But yeah, there are some good fights on this card. But ultimately, you've got Mike Jackson fighting on this card, which tells you all you need to know about the card.
I can't believe Mike Jackson is still in the UFC.
He's got to win. He got to win last time out by disqualification, but he got to win.
The GOAT. Man, we can't. He might be on the show one day. Like he's a media member who fights or something.
Okay, we'll give him a free pass this week, but
next week we're right back.
Next week when we do a proper breakdown of the card, he's getting it. He is getting it.
Anything else we need to cover off before we head out of here?
I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, guys, next week, me and Tim all over the place. Tim said, obviously he'll be at Glory this weekend, which I hope is this weekend. It's not like next month because we're all over the place with dates. But, we haven't got a UFC card this weekend, so it'll be a big breakdown of Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr., big breakdown of the Glory kickboxing card this weekend. And, drop a couple of comments in the comment section or get in touch with us on, we'll post it out on Instagram, post it out on Twitter. And, you tell us what to talk about next week, because me and Tim could talk about absolutely anything combat sports for at least an hour every Monday. So, yeah, be sure to just let us know what you want to hear, and we'll chat shit about it next week.
That's right. Thanks so much, Frazer. From Tim Wheaton, Frazer Krohn, MMA Sucka. Thanks so much.
Nice one, mate.